Welcome back. We've had some wonderful sessions over the past 2 days, and we want to continue that momentum with our next session, a conversation with Myrna Soto. Guiding this riveting discussion is a longtime friend of ASER and the Senior Vice President of Development and Strategic Initiatives at Unidos US, Delia De la Vara. Welcome, Delia.
Thank you, Vanessa. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. I'm not just with Unidos US as a Senior Vice President. Unidos US is also a proud coalition member of ASER since its founding in 1986. And we're proud to be a partner on many initiatives with ASER and our corporate partners who we share in common. And in particular today, I'm proud to be here with you for the Latina Empower Her Summit. I'm here, as Vanessa mentioned, to have a conversation with one of our Latina powerhouses, a woman who has lived and learned along her journey, and today we'll share a few of those valuable lessons learned with the rest of us. Myrna Soto has spent over 28 years in an interesting sector of the corporate industry of the corporate sector in cybersecurity, in technology, and information and data protection. You can imagine the professional life lessons she's gained along the way in a sector that has not always been and still currently isn't as diverse as the rest of the country. She has a lengthy and very impressive bio you can read in more detail, but I'll share with you just a couple of her current titles. She currently serves as the Chief Strategy and Trust Officer for ForcePoint, a global cybersecurity technology leader for user and data protection. She's also a corporate director and board member for several boards, a venture capital investor and advisor, and highly recognized in the field of information security. She's got a lot of accolades. We can get lost talking about all the different unique and important roles and experiences along her career, but we don't have a lot of time, so we want to dive in and actually talk about some of the lessons learned from her experiences. So my first kind of opening is to Myrna. Myrna, you've worked in a field that isn't known for its diversity, as I mentioned, much less seeing the value add of diverse talent right in front of them. And similarly, many in our audience have experienced being the only Latina or woman in their corporate space, at meetings, at summits, at the table that they're at. What habits or practices have you developed, being one of the only or the first in your sector? How have those habits helped you both advance professionally or persevere personally, or both?
Well, Delia, thank you so much for that very humbling introduction. I really do appreciate it. And thank you to ASER and the entire ASER team, Unidos, for allowing us the opportunity to get together today and to chat about whatever we want to talk about. So thank you for the question. So very often, as you mentioned, I have found myself to be the only one in the room, often the only woman, often the only Latina. And then when you add those two together in the cybersecurity field, it's definitely been one of those careers where I can never say that it was designed perfectly. But certainly some of the things that I've incorporated, and I hope some of the folks that are listening today are able to take away as a nugget of advice, is really to think about growth very differently than what we have been traditionally taught, right? We think of growth as a ascension and progression up. And I'd like to share that many of the different roles that I have had, that I currently serve, and my path to those roles have come at a lot of lateral growth. And I think that's really important for people to understand. A practice of constant learning, constantly stretching yourself, and really, I like to say, never being comfortable. Always looking for what else can I do? What else can I accomplish? And very often that's not necessarily always a progression upward, but sometimes it's a lateral movement. Sometimes it's reaching, even now in the political arena, right? Reaching across the aisle to a different role, to a different business, to a different industry, to advance one's career. But I hope that answers your question initially. I know we have a lot more to talk about that I'll weave in some of this as I answer some of your other questions.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. The lateral growth that we should keep our eyes open to is just as important. This summit is about the balance of pursuing career and the opportunities that are available in the corporate sector, but also having that balance on the personal side with family, with our own families or other personal choices that we have. And oftentimes it's daunting, but I caught in your background that it was an interesting award, because I think it really encaptures what a lot of us feel like we have to be. And it's a Wonder Woman award. And can you tell us a little bit about that? I'm kind of curious. It didn't give a lot of detail, but I'm curious what the story is behind that, because it sounds emblematic of what we all try to be or accomplish.
Sure. Thank you for asking that question. It's definitely a recognition that I'm extremely proud of. We all have a number of recognitions, and I'm very proud about every single one that's ever been bestowed upon me. This one in particular is a unique one. It's really specific to the industry that I was in. I used to be the Global Chief Information Security Officer for Comcast Corporation for nearly a decade. And during that time, in the media, there was a Wonder Woman Award and a class of ladies that would be identified as the Wonder Woman class every year. And I was named to the Wonder Woman class in 2017. Oh, it feels so long ago now that I said that out loud. But the Wonder Woman Award is about women in the field really breaking the glass ceiling and taking on roles and serving accomplishments that typically we have not seen women in those roles before. And for many years, the Wonder Woman Award, the issuer is called Multi-Channel News. And again, it's a media and broadcast type of award. These awards were always given to women that were firsts or women that have done tremendous things in their role to advance the agenda for other women. But I happen to be the first Latina to get the Wonder Woman Award, and the first who happened to be in technology. They were always, more often than not, marketing, media broadcasting, things of that nature. And I'm very proud of the fact that I was bestowed that Wonder Woman distinction and was able to represent my Hispanic, Latina community in the Wonder Woman ranks, and to also be able to represent technology. Now, you open the question with kind of balancing things in our professional lives and our personal lives. And being a Wonder Woman is definitely being someone that has the ability to juggle as much as they can. But it's really about making choices, right? It's not about doing everything at the same time. It's about setting the right priorities for our career, for our families, and making sure that we are making those choices that resonate with our values as much as possible. I often mentor a number of young ladies who say, here are all the things I want to do, Myrna, and I don't see me being able to do them all and to progress my career at the rate that I would like. And I often share with them that it's about choices. It doesn't mean you can't do everything that you want. You may not be able to do it all at the same time, but we can certainly learn from being able to prioritize and do a number of things that progress our career and our personal lives in concert.
That's a lesson that's hard when it's learned, and it's hard to keep in practice because we're inundated with requests, and we want to do good. We want to do more. We want to be available, but ultimately, we do need to make choices about where we prioritize our time for work, for career, for personal, for the people around us too, because that's where the balance is. And it really is, that's an important lesson. It was, as you were saying it was reminding me, yes, am I thinking about the choices I'm making every week? I got to come back to that question, right? So you are, accomplished at the C-suite level, at the very high corporate level in the last decade and a half of your career specifically. Was C-suite your aspiration, or how did you come to pursuing these opportunities at such a high level in an industry, as you just mentioned, that didn't have a lot of you around, didn't have an example? We say you got to see it to, we want to see it to be it, but you didn't have that. So how was that an aspiration? Was that your original plan, or did it come along the way with mentoring, coaching, or other kinds of influences that helped you see that this could be part of your path?
Yeah. So first off, I'll share that it was never really part of the plan. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest nuggets of advice that I want people to hear. We often see people in certain roles and we believe that the steps taken to get to these roles were very clear and very defined, and that it was a very distinct plan to get there. And I am living proof that that is not the case. I originally did my formal education in psychology, and I had every plan to be a therapist. Now, there's a whole other conversation that we can have about how I apply that psychology degree every day. But it really came about from being in the business world. And really, as you mentioned, we like to live by the mantra, if you could see it, you can be it. And I wasn't seeing it. Yet I was blessed to come from a family, and I have to give every ounce of kudos and recognition to my mother, who would tell me every day as I was growing up that I could do anything that I wanted to do. And I know that we say that, and we say that to children all the time. And, we look at it and say, listen, with the right aspiration, the right work, you can accomplish anything that you want. But when you don't see it, you wonder, is it really possible? And, I always kept her thoughts in my mind to basically say, well, if we're not seeing it, then create it. There's a quote out there that says that she didn't see a hero, so she decided to become one. And my aspiration was to go down a particular path, and I will grant a lot of credit to a number of my leaders and mentors who saw what I didn't see in myself. They said, Myrna, you have a unique knack of communicating, of influencing people. You lead without any influence. And this is a type of individual that we need to get into some of the technology world because it's new for many people. Now I'm going to date myself because this is now 28 years. But that actually came through what others saw in me. And I was asked to take on a role that I would have never thought of taking on or even reaching for myself. So early in my career, I ran a call center. And I ran a call center as a business person, as the manager of the call center, and quickly became exposed to the value of technology. And I had one of my dearest mentors tap me on the shoulder and say, we really need you to be part of these projects that help design the technology for the business. Are you interested? And I was terrified. I was like, no, I'm not interested. I knew what I knew. I knew what I wanted to do, and I felt I was good at it. And they were very encouraging to the point where I will admit, they said, okay, we're going to force you to do it. And that stretch, that reach to do something that I was not comfortable with, because my formal education was not in technology, was a very pivotal moment in my career. And I thank that person and God every day that moment and that opportunity was given to me, because I have built a career around becoming a technology leader, now a corporate director and board member, serving as what we like to call the digital director, the technology savvy director. And it would have never happened if I would not have taken that leap. But I will admit, I had a little bit of a push.
That's a very important lesson, to kind of listen, to be open to listening to the people around us who really do see the talent that we don't see in ourselves. I think as women, and then culturally as Latinos, we are humble 10 times over. We say, oh, if I can do it, anybody else can do it. But really, not a lot of people can do some of the things that we do, or the way we do it. And I think that's, what we bring to the table in all of our identities also adds to it. And we really do need to open our eyes to kind of see what other people see in us, because we won't acknowledge or recognize it ourselves. And we do, that push is really important. And I don't know that enough of us kind of open our ears often to kind of hear what other people are saying and really take it to note and think. But it's oftentimes, and I don't know if you are this way with your friends, I know I'm this way with my friends, it's advice I would give my friends, but it's not often advice I would listen to myself unless somebody told me from the outside. It's just that duality that we kind of live with, right?
I think part of it is culturally we are inherently humble. We don't boast, we don't brag. We kind of take a position of acquiescing to the moment or the circumstances. Obviously our Hispanic culture has a very strong work ethic, is extremely loyal, is extremely, powerful, but we don't necessarily believe that we are able at times. And we're not necessarily good at making sure that people understand what we're capable of doing, but most importantly, what we can apply our previous experience to. I know that you and I had discussed in previous conversations about the fact that, a lot of times people will look at progression and they will seek opportunities or look at roles and they'll say, oh, I can't do that. I don't have all the experience. I don't fit the role perfectly. Right. Well, again, going back to my example, neither did I. But I was able to learn. I was able to use the experience I had in the business and apply it to the technology design, which then resulted in applying it to cybersecurity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a great way of really not discounting what you have to offer and to really reach for it and know, as long as you're willing to learn and as long as you're willing to listen and apply yourself, you know what? Your possibilities are endless.
Yeah. We were talking about this, having to feel like we check every box, but sometimes we check certain boxes, we over-index on certain boxes, and we might under-index, but in the balance, we have what you're talking about. We have the full picture or the full kit of what could be valuable for that role or for that opportunity. And we need to stop undervaluing or underselling ourselves and our own skills and abilities that could contribute to that. Networking is also a big important part of advancing in the corporate sector. A little bit of both who you know and who knows you. It was noted and mentioned that golf has been a friend of yours in this space. How has golf or have other activities or other strategies for you in networking help you build? And is there a strategy to networking that you've pulled either through golf or through some of the other activities you leverage for this?
I love the fact that you're asking me this question because unfortunately, this past year, because of COVID and what the entire world has had to deal with, very minor in nature, but I have not had much of an opportunity to play golf over the last year. But thankfully, people are healthy and that's the most important thing rather than playing a sport. But I will say that I picked up the game of golf kind of mid-career. And I did so because it was the one opportunity to have someone's attention for a long period of time, right? Okay. So when you think about the game of golf, a round of golf could last 3 to 4 hours. And if you're interested in building relationships with people, now golf is not the only thing, but for me at that moment, golf was a great opportunity to be able to build relationships with people, invite them to come play, invite them to learn to play together, and to really have a very intimate time together where you're not distracted by, things at a cocktail party or other things that were happening, and really be able to build connections. And I think that networking, wholeheartedly is about building quality connections. Yes, at times it's about who you know, and you're absolutely right. It's about who knows you and what have you done? What have you accomplished? What are your aspirations? It's one of the number one things that people fail to do. You need to let people know what it is you're interested in. At any chance moment when you meet someone and you build a relationship with them, you have an opportunity to tell them. I'll give you a great example. I recently had a conversation with a colleague that we reconnected recently. In my mind, this colleague was completely satisfied with the role that they were fulfilling in their organization. I come to find out now that they're thinking of retiring and they're thinking about joining a corporate board. That's one of the things they'd like to do. They have not been approached yet. And now I'm going to connect them with certain people that will help make that happen. I would have never known that if they didn't tell me that. Now, that comes from building relationships. That comes from the power of networking. One of the things that I always like to make sure people realize about networking, though, is you network with duality. And what I mean by that is it's not one-sided. When you meet people, you make connections with people, it should never be about what can that person do for me. It's about what can we do to support one another. And that's one of the things that I love about ACED and other organizations that have been the pay it forward type of organization and connecting people. And I truly believe that what you give to the universe, you get back in spades. So when you do network, yes, it is important to meet people, to get to know people, but don't be afraid to help people, because that is the only way that the universe will pay you back. It definitely has to be a duality to the assistance, to the connections, to the knowledge that you gain. I often say that when I mentor individuals, I learn as much as they do. I learn from my mentees. So think about that when you're networking. It's not one-sided. It needs to be a very cohesive type of relationship. But definitely make sure that you get out there and meet people and tell your story and make sure people understand what you've done, what you're interested in, because that really has a tremendously powerful impact.
Myrna, you talked about this at the top about some of the, well, we all have intersectional identities. Women, in this particular group, we're starting off with two. We're women and Latinas. There are two that you proudly share as well, or three, I guess, with women, being a woman, being a Latina, and a member of the LGBTQ community. Were you always comfortable being your full authentic self in work environments, or did that evolve? And if it evolved, what advice can you share with viewers about that?
Sure. So I will tell you, it evolved. I would tell you that being a female in technology was always very difficult, but there was nowhere to hide. I mean, you're a female in technology. You have the opportunity, or I had the opportunity, to trailblaze for other women in the sector. And that gave me a lot of wind in my sails, a lot of purpose, and a lot of energy to do so. I'll never forget the first time someone that I worked with, some of my peers, heard me speaking Spanish to a group of workers that were in a particular building. And their reaction was shock that I was speaking in Spanish. They said, "You speak Spanish?" And I said, "As a matter of fact, I do." And they said, "Are you Hispanic?" I said, "Yes, I am. My father is Cuban and my mother is from Puerto Rico." And they said, "We had no idea." And at that moment, I realized, well, why didn't they? Well, they didn't because I didn't present. I didn't present that way. I didn't share that. And it wasn't that I was hiding it. It was just a non-issue in my mind. But young in my career, of course, this is when this happened. I realized how important it was to represent. And at that moment forward, I made sure that every opportunity that I had, not only did I share that I was a Latina, but that I advocated for Latinas and Latinos for opportunities in the roles that I was in and in the companies that I was with. Now, being a member of the LGBT community obviously came, even in the Hispanic culture, with challenges, not always widely accepted when I was growing up. However, I'm very proud of the fact that I had a very supportive family, very supportive network of friends and colleagues that allowed me the comfort to come out and to represent the LGBT community as well. Very proud to say that I've been a member of that community for a very long time. I've been with my wife for 18 years. And that intersection of being a woman in technology, a Hispanic woman, and a lesbian really converged and really evolved over time. It was not something that just happened, but it has made me a much more powerful and authentic leader, because when I say those things out loud, now there are people that are hearing me and they'll say, "Oh, I can see it, I can be it." And knowing very well that those aspects of my identity, yes, they matter. They matter a great deal. But what also matters is what I do for my community, how I perform in the roles that I do, and how I respect others. So I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. If I was in the company, any of the companies that you worked at, I wouldn't just see you, especially with your intentionally presenting as Latina, as LGBTQ. I wouldn't just see you, but what's important and what was powerful for me growing up was hearing that voice at decision-making tables, hearing not just taking up a seat, but contributing, and people listening. People who are not of my community or my culture asking me questions. When my colleagues see that, when my team sees that, when my niece sees that, it's what I saw with my mom, and I'm sure that's and so I share that because I share that with everybody. Bring young people to the table, but ensure that they see you
Amen.
actively participating at that table, because that's the other part of being seen and being heard. And it's so powerful, and it sits in the back of your mind, and you don't really notice it until that question comes up. Can I apply for this role? And you're like, you know what? I saw Myrna controlling that table, owning that board table. So you know what? I think I can. I think I have a little bit of what Myrna has in her. So I can be it too, not just because I saw it, because I heard it, because I saw it acted out. That's just so powerful. It moves me. So sorry. Let's see. So we do have a question. We're going to get kick-started with some questions. We do have a question from the audience, and it says, you spoke of the importance of prioritization when pursuing opportunities. And in this viewer's experience, the ability to do that professionally to do that as a professional is also tied to having a personal strategy, not the same as your career plan. Do you have a personal strategy that has guided your career choices?
I do. I do have a personal strategy. I will admit that strategy has evolved and has developed and has really blossomed over time. I won't say that I had that personal strategy way in the beginning of my career when I was asked to do something that I didn't even think about. But I absolutely do have a personal strategy. And when it comes to prioritizing the things that I have done throughout my career, I want to make sure that I mention how important it is to have support, right? When we think about individuals, and this is the Empower Her Summit, so I'm going to speak specifically to Latinas and ladies that are listening to us, is that you want to start a family, or you have certain aspects of your personal life that you're thinking about doing, and you start thinking about, what are my career plans? What are the steps I'm going to take? I think it's extremely important to be methodical about having a strategy, but I do not believe that we need to define every step precisely. And the reason is that things will occur in our life that we are not expecting, that really shape our opportunity to grow. If I think about my career moves, none of them were planned. They either came through an opportunity that I was not thinking of myself, but someone thought that I would be good for it, or it came out of an indirect connection to another role that I had been pursuing or doing at the time. So I think that the personal strategy is important when it comes to who are your advisors, who are the people that you trust, who are the people that you want to seek advice from, who could be your sponsor, who could be your mentor. But I really, really believe that the methodical steps should not be defined. I remember, growing up, and some of my colleagues would say things like, I want to do the following by this age, or I want to do the following by this time. And what I found is that you see people working towards a goal. It's very important to work towards goals, but they were working towards goals that were defined without any true legitimate value to the person. It was more of a race. And if you lead by a personal strategy of personal growth, being able to continue to grow personally and professionally, giving back to your community, really the concept of time is not necessarily an enemy of ours. And that's where, I've shared with many of my mentees, who say, oh, I'm really worried, Myrna, if I have a child now, as an example, if I have a child now, it's going to set me back in my career. First of all, I don't believe that. I don't believe that any woman needs to say, well, if I have a child, it's going to set me back in my career. Well, if you have the right support system around you, if you have the right ability to have that child and continue to pursue the things that keep you motivated, that's really important. We do the things that we do. We need to love the things that we do. I honestly don't believe that I have worked for years. Why? Because I love what I do. I wake up every morning, love doing the cybersecurity work that I do. I love my corporate board service. I look forward to doing more of that in the decades to come. But really thinking about your personal strategy around who is your support system, who are your advisors, and surrounding yourself by people that will help you grow.
In this past year, we've realized what things we want to prioritize in our life, realizing how much more limited our lives can be in this pandemic, with economic challenges that many in our community, many in our country have faced. We've had to make different decisions, and this is where, goal. I love what you said, and I wrote it down. Goals defined along your personal values, and then with something else you said earlier about what you put out comes back to you. So if you were, we talk a lot about intentionality, putting it out into the universe, and prayers on it, and all kinds of different things that we can use. But it does, time and again, I hear from friends and colleagues that putting it out there and being intentional brings it back to you in different ways, and it can accelerate or put it in the right time and space for you along your journey. Yeah. If it doesn't happen, there might be a reason, and another opportunity might open up for you to strengthen or develop along that way. That way, the goal you're trying to get to can be achieved.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I just would add, and I know I may have mentioned this before, is that there are a lot of things we want to do, and there is nothing to prevent us from doing them all. It's just, do we have to do them all at the same time?
Right. We have another question here in the queue. As someone who has been the first and the only one for most of her career, I imagine you can relate to the exhaustion that this experience can produce. Having to be the one to always explain what some would say should be obvious, for example, inclusion and equity in the workplace. What do you do to re-energize and motivate yourself when you feel tired of being on the front line of a company's D&I journey? You got a lot of experience in this.
Yes. So it can be very exhausting. I will wholeheartedly agree with the person that submitted the question. It also has a tremendous amount of responsibility, right? When we think about being the first, I'll use Vice President Harris's comment. I may be the first, but I won't be the last, right? I love that when she said that. And if I think about that statement, it is similar to what has energized me when I have been on the front lines of being the representative of trying to motivate and trying to push agendas, being the first, being the only. I'm motivated by the fact that I will not be the last. And that by itself is the universe giving back to me. When I do things like this, when I have and to speak about the variety of things that have happened through my career and my learnings and things of that nature, and I'll get a note from someone that says, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm thinking about doing the following, and now that I heard you, I'm definitely going to pursue it. Or something in that nature that just reinforces the messaging, that re-energizes me. So it's okay to be tired, and it's okay to take a moment to re-energize and recharge. But I really do think that knowing that what I may have done, because I have done things in the past and I'm doing things today, but what I have done and what I will continue to do, God willing, will blaze a path for many, many other people. And I will not be the last. And I can't take credit for that statement because Vice President Harris, you said it, but I loved it. And it just really, really galvanized my spirit about it.
I was thinking, as you were talking, those of us who witness or who are in conversation and inspired by leaders, that little thing that you mentioned, a note of thanks, a note of gratitude for what you see, that also is re-energizing. And so we all, it's like a circular thing. We say thank you to those who inspire us, and that energizes those who are in the leadership positions to keep doing more. These are lots of valuable nuggets I'm writing here. We're coming up. We still have a few more minutes for questions. I'm going to go to the next one. What is one of your most valued pieces of advice given to you by a mentor or sponsor?
So this is going to be an interesting answer, because the best piece of advice that I've ever received is advice that I did not take. Usually you talk about advice and you say, oh, someone gave me advice and I pursued that advice and it resulted in a positive outcome. In this scenario, I got advice from someone, I wouldn't call them a mentor per se, but it was someone that was seen as a figure of authority. And after some reflection, I decided not to take the advice. And the advice goes back to what we were talking about before about being your authentic self. I had someone early in my career say to me, Myrna, you're great. You're doing a great job. But sometimes when you talk with your hands. And sometimes when you talk, your voice goes up a little bit when you're kind of excited about things. And basically the person was telling me, hide your passionate Latina DNA, because that's not going to fit in our culture. That's not going to fit in the corporate culture that we're in. And I remember thinking about it and saying, oh my God, how can I not be who I am and communicate the way that I am? And I explained to the person, I said, hey, when my tone or inflection may get elevated, it's because I'm really excited and passionate about what we're talking about and driven by what we're talking about. And I'm looking to motivate people about what we're talking about. And my hands, oh my God, this is how I talk. And there's a lot of people from our Hispanic culture that speak with their hands. Some don't, some do. And I remember going home that night, and again, this was early in my career. Thankfully, people have progressed a great deal. But it resonates to the fact that sometimes advice is not always meant to be taken word for word. But what's important is for you to reflect. And when I received that advice, what I reflected on was that someone wanted me to be something that I am not. And again, not my authentic self. And upon some consultation with some of my trusted advisors, my mother, again, in this case, she said, what are you going to do? She didn't tell me don't or do. She said, what are you going to do? And I said, Mom, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be who I am. And if they don't like me, they don't like me. I'll go somewhere else. And to this day, when you think about that, or I think about that, it's really important for us to be in an environment that supports us, that accepts us. Think about the different identities that I mentioned during this discussion. You want to feel welcomed, you want to feel included, but you absolutely need to be yourself. So that was the best advice that I ever got that I never took.
We are in a slightly different time. A lot has changed just in the year, and since this past summer. And now we're actually having conversations about what if we all present our authentic selves? Then it's not the outlier, it is part of what becomes every day. We all have to kind of start to feel comfortable doing that. It does require a lot of other shifts and changes to happen. But if we work collectively towards that, what can we see in a few years? How different will the corporate sector, will these meeting rooms, summits, conferences, board tables look when we are collectively supporting each other to be more authentic in all the spaces that we occupy in the corporate sector?
Yeah, and we're making progress. We're making enormous progress if you think back. So yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I'm excited and how fast. I mean, we've been talking about these conversations for decades. And just the acceleration in the past couple years, but more importantly, the past year has been phenomenal. And I want to keep running with that. I'm going to, do my little water break but keep the marathon going, because there's so much more that we need to shift and change, and that we can. to what you were saying, that we can shift and change, that we have the ability and the capacity to do and the skill set to do. I'll go to the last question. We're almost right at time. Hello, Myrna. Fantastic journey. Thank you for sharing so candidly. Her question, this is Zahindra Pietri. Hopefully I got that right. It was a quick read. But the question she has is, I gather that in the stretch opportunity pivotal moment that you described, you were invited to the table. What advice do you have for situations where you want a seat at the table, you ask for a seat, but are declined or not welcome?
So to be honest, my stretch opportunity, I cannot say was an invite to the table. It resulted in a seat at the table. But my stretch opportunities in my career, I was, for lack of a better term, declined an opportunity. And I took the time to really think about what were the dynamics as to why. And you can, slice it 1,000 different ways. Was there a better candidate? Do I need a little bit more experience? Whatever the case may be. But here's the thing. We gain our credibility through a variety of ways. And mainly our credibility is through our ability to deliver and our ability to collaborate and the ability to move things forward. And when I think about my seat at the table, it took me a little bit of effort to get the seat at the table, but that effort was showing the ability to produce, right? Whether it was, producing on my projects, being able to build on a business line, being able to present value. By the way, really important, everyone works hard. We need to be able to demonstrate the value of our hard work. What are we contributing to? What are we facilitating? How are we making a difference? And often that requires us to communicate, right? To communicate and to make sure people understand what it is you're accomplishing. I'll never forget my first C-level role came to bear out of a presentation that I did to another executive who had no idea the amount of work and the amount of value that my team had been producing. And when that presentation happened, the person walked away and said, "Oh my God, there's so much great stuff coming out of your group. I had no idea." Please take that as advice. You need to share what your value is. You need to communicate what it is that you're accomplishing. Of course, going back, we're humble. We need to toot our horn, not arrogantly, but we do need to toot our horn and make sure people understand our value. That got me the seat at my table. That got me my first C-level role. And then, of course, I had the opportunity to make sure that I was listening to the value that others provided to give them that same opportunity and pull them up or push them up into those type of roles. So definitely think about that when you think about, hey, I want a seat at the table. Make sure people understand why you are worthy of that seat at the table.
Yeah, and I think that, this ties back to so many of the other lessons that you mentioned earlier. I think it goes back to that two-way street or two-sided strategy you mentioned under networking. We already know a lot of folks don't understand who we are. They don't, either from a gender perspective, from a culture perspective, from any other perspective. So we have to share. Unfortunately, we do have to keep educating. Yeah. That is a responsibility, and we got to, for where it feels burdensome, we got to kind of shift that to kind of be something we know we have to carry. It's going to be a while still, but I know we're at time, and before Vanessa scolds me about it, I could talk with you for hours. It's been such a joy to keep learning from you, Myrna. And I'm so inspired again by your career, by what you've shared, by your authenticity, and just, it's just been great. I don't know if Ased comes back in here to take us out, or if we just wrap it up. If not, thank you so much, Myrna. It's been a pleasure. And to our viewers at the Empower Her Summit, hope you enjoyed.